Avoid the stupidly confident. They are the ones destroying the world. Albert Einstein. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. Everything started not with people, but with a mirror. I didn't see it at first. It was just a day like many others. Gray, ordinary, almost invisible. But something in me stopped responding. The world kept moving, yet I felt like I had fallen out of the rhythm. I didn't know if I was tired or broken, but I knew one thing for sure. I had lost something. Maybe it was myself. I tried to distract myself. I filled my days with noise, conversations, work, messages, sounds. But silence always returned. It waited like a shadow behind the door. One evening I looked into the mirror, not just to check my face or hair. I looked longer, deeper, and I saw something I didn't expect. I didn't recognize the eyes looking back at me. They were mine, but empty, like someone had left and never returned. That's when they started to appear, one by one, not as people at first, but as echoes, as sensations, as strange coldness in the chest or sudden tension in the stomach. Then, in the faces, in gestures, in words spoken by others, but all of them carried the same trace, the same signature, like they were connected. There were 5 of them, 5 figures that changed everything, not just because they hurt me, but because they revealed me. The first was audacity. She didn't knock. She didn't wait for permission. She simply entered. She came through someone I called a friend. He spoke loudly, laughed even louder, and always stepped forward, even when it meant stepping on others. At first I admired that. It looked like confidence, like strength, like clarity. But it wasn't. It was something else. It was the hunger to dominate. He would cross boundaries and act as if nothing had happened. He would make jokes that stung, but then say, "Relax, I'm just kidding." He would take what he wanted, then turn away before the echo of your pain reached him. His power lived in your silence. The more you tolerated, the stronger he became. Audacity is not about volume. It's about intrusion. It walks in, not because the door is open, but because it believes no door should exist. She doesn't ask. She demands. She doesn't apologize. She blames. And the longer she stays in your life, the more your own voice starts to disappear. I remember the moment I realized she had taken root. I was sitting in a cafe, quiet, with a cup of something warm. He came in, saw me, walked over and said, "I need your help. Drop what you're doing." Just like that. No hello, no question, just an order. And I obeyed. I stood up, left my drink, and followed. Why? Because audacity trains you to betray yourself. You start small. You say yes when you want to say no. You smile when something cuts inside. You adjust, adapt, swallow. And suddenly, you no longer remember what you wanted in the first place. Audacity has no interest in your soul. She wants your obedience, your flexibility, your guilt. She survives off your discomfort. The scariest part is, she often wins. People admire boldness. They confuse it with leadership. They call it charisma. But true leadership listens. True strength respects. Audacity doesn't lead. She conquers. And if you don't stop her, she keeps going. She moves in deeper. She finds your softest parts and turns them into exits. She doesn't need to scream. She just needs you to stay quiet. That day in the cafe, something cracked in me. I went home, looked in the mirror again, and asked myself, when did I start obeying what I don't even respect? It didn't give an answer, but I knew this. The first one must be named, must be seen, must be removed. Audacity, dressed as strength, is poison, and the longer you let her in, the more she replaces your voice with hers. Some people admire her, some even fall in love with her, but not me. Not anymore. The second one didn't walk in loudly. He didn't demand, didn't push. He made space around himself just by existing. His presence was like perfume, smooth, pleasant, seductive. People leaned in when he spoke. He knew how to use silence. He knew how to pause just long enough for you to want to hear more. He had taste, culture, stories. He looked like someone who had lived many lives. And maybe he had, but all of them revolved around him. The egoist doesn't steal from you directly. He makes you hand it over yourself. Attention, energy, admiration. At first it feels like being near something magnetic. You feel special, like he chose to open up only to you. But the more you listen, the more you realize you're not in the story. You're just a mirror he speaks into. His pain is always bigger. His achievements are always brighter. His needs are always first. And when you speak, really speak, he drifts. Not rudely, not obviously, just enough to make you question if your words have any weight at all. He listens with a smile, nods at the right moments, maybe even says something kind. But the kindness is air, weightless, floating, gone the second you try to lean on it. Because the egoist does not share space. He occupies it. Every conversation becomes a stage. Every silence becomes a spotlight. And you become part of the set. I remember the night I understood who he really was. We sat on the rooftop, city lights below, stars above. I opened up. Not because I planned to. It just slipped out. I spoke about fear, about how lost I felt, about how something inside me had dimmed. He nodded, said, "That's deep," and then began to talk about his last trip abroad, about how standing near the ocean made him realize he was meant for more, for greatness, for something beyond ordinary people, like me. That was the moment the mirror cracked again. It's not that he was cruel, it's not that he lied, but being around him was like breathing in a place without oxygen. At first you think you're fine, but then you start getting tired, lightheaded, hollow, and by the time you understand why, you've already collapsed. The egoist doesn't destroy with violence. He empties with elegance. He makes you feel small without ever raising his voice. And if you ever confront him, gently, carefully, he'll say, "Why are you so sensitive?" Or worse, "I'm just being honest." No, he's being centered, always, on himself. There's a quiet kind of damage that comes from people like this. They don't yell, they don't hit, they don't abandon. They just never really arrive. And yet you keep waiting, hoping, thinking that if you just give a little more, he'll finally see you, hear you, choose you. But the egoist doesn't choose anyone. He chooses mirrors. And once yours stops reflecting the version he likes, he moves on. It took me months to pull away. Not because he held me, but because I held on to the version of him I imagined. The man who once looked into my eyes and said, "You get me." But what he meant was, I accepted being invisible while he shined. Now I know the truth. Ego is not always loud. Sometimes it's charming, articulate, dressed in poetry and wine, but underneath, there's a void, a deep, endless hunger to be admired, fed, adored. And if you stay too long near that hunger, it starts eating parts of you too. I looked in the mirror again, weeks later. My eyes were tired, but I saw myself a little clearer. Not perfect, but present. I whispered to my own reflection, "You are not a mirror. You are not a stage. You're not a background." And the moment you forget that, someone like him will remind you, not with cruelty, but with silence, not with fists, but with absence. The egoist is never really with you. He's only ever with himself. The third didn't look like a danger. He looked like safety. He knew how to listen, how to touch the right words, how to lean in when you felt weak and say things that stitched you back together. He remembered little details, followed up with soft concern, made you feel seen in ways others never did. You began to think, maybe this is someone real, someone rare. But the betrayer doesn't show his face in the beginning. He plays the long game. He builds trust not because he values it, but because he knows how to use it. He made me believe I could be vulnerable, that I could say things I'd buried for years and not be judged. And when I finally opened the door, he stepped inside, gently, calmly, like a guest. But what he left behind was not comfort. It was silence, a strange, sharp silence, the kind that arrives right before something breaks. Because the betrayer waits until you need him most, until your walls are down, until your guard is asleep. And then, with careful precision, he takes what he wants and disappears. It wasn't always direct. He didn't scream, didn't slam doors. He just started speaking my secrets to others, in little ways, in moments dressed as jokes, in conversations I wasn't part of, but always found their way back to me. And when I finally said, "Why would you share that?" he smiled and said, "I didn't think it was a big deal." That was his shield. That was his mask, minimization, disguising harm as harmlessness, dismissing your pain as overreaction. Betrayal isn't always a knife. Sometimes it's a whisper, a shrug, a joke. Sometimes it's someone acting like they didn't know the weight of what they carried, but they knew. They always know. The betrayer studies you, learns your patterns, watches where your breath stutters, where your voice shakes. He learns your wounds not to heal them, but to hold them. And when the time comes, he presses exactly there. What hurt most wasn't what he said to others. It was what he didn't say to me. The way he stopped looking in the eye, the way his warmth cooled without reason, the way presence became distance, and distance became absence. He didn't leave. He just started erasing himself, bit by bit, until I was the only one holding the memory of what we had. And yet, even then, I doubted myself. I told myself, maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe I was being dramatic. But deep down I knew. The deepest betrayal is not when someone lies. It's when someone lets you believe you're safe, and then shows you never were. The betrayer teaches a lesson no one wants to learn, that not everyone who listens cares, that not everyone who stays plans to stay, that some hands are warm only because they're close to the fire they'll throw you into. There's a specific cold that follows betrayal. It's not anger, not even grief. It's disorientation. Like you've woken up in a place that looks the same but feels different. Like you've lost something inside of you that had no name, but mattered. I remember standing in the middle of a room once after it all. Music was playing, people were laughing, and I felt like a ghost. Present, but unseen. Loud on the outside, cracked inside. And I understood. This is what betrayal leaves behind. Not just broken trust, but a broken sense of reality. He moved on. Of course he did. That's what they do. The betrayer never looks back. He carries no guilt, only stories that paint him as misunderstood. But me, I kept the silence. I kept the sting. I kept the lesson. Now I don't give keys to just anyone. I don't offer my story to those who smile too easily, not because I'm bitter, but because I know the price of opening the wrong door. The betrayer always comes in soft, but he leaves you sharp, and the scar he leaves behind doesn't fade. It whispers. It reminds. And that's how you learn to listen. Not just to words, but to absence. Not just to warmth, but to temperature that shifts when no one else notices. He was my third, and he taught me this. When someone breaks what was never theirs to break, they don't deserve what remains. The fourth didn't strike. She wept. She didn't come with demands. She came with sadness, with heavy sighs, with slumped shoulders, with a voice that always trembled just a little. She spoke like the world was always too loud, too cruel, too fast. And at first I leaned in. I wanted to help, to carry some of that weight, to offer warmth where the cold had settled in her chest. But the complainer doesn't want light. She wants shadows that agree with hers. She doesn't seek healing. She seeks echoes that confirm everything is hard, unfair, broken. She lives in a loop. The same story, the same pain, the same helpless tone that pulls you in like a slow tide. At first, you think it's empathy, that by listening, you're doing something kind, that maybe she just needs time, a little care, a little stability. But time passes, and the storm never lifts. Not because it can't, but because she doesn't want it to. Her suffering is identity. Her wounds are introduction. Her sorrow is her only way to connect. And once you step into her rain, she makes sure you stay wet. I remember how it started. She would call late, voice already breaking. One bad thing after another. Work, family, friends, life. Always a new reason to fall apart. And I stayed. I listened. I offered advice, support, silence, whatever she needed. But nothing ever changed. My words fell like stones into a bottomless well. No echo, no movement, just more darkness. She was not cruel, but she consumed. Every conversation returned to her. Every exchange circled the same drain. Even my own pain was just a stage for hers to reappear. If I shared a hard moment, she would match it, double it, make it hers. I couldn't cry without her sobbing louder. The complainer doesn't steal like the betrayer. She drains, slowly, constantly. She makes you feel guilty for smiling, makes you question if joy is even appropriate anymore. Her world is always collapsing, and if you're near, yours starts cracking too. The hardest part was the helplessness, the knowing that no matter what I did, it wouldn't be enough. Because she didn't want a ladder out. She wanted company in the pit. She wanted validation, not transformation. Agreement, not clarity. I tried boundaries. I tried space. But she called it abandonment, called me selfish, cold, said I didn't understand what it's like to hurt all the time, and maybe she was right. I don't. But I do know what it's like to drown while trying to save someone who doesn't want to swim. There's a quiet manipulation in constant suffering. It demands without asking. It claims your time, your energy, your attention, without ever giving anything back. And the more you give, the more it takes. Because to the complainer, your presence is proof that her pain is valid, not because it is, but because you stayed. Leaving felt like betrayal, but staying felt like erasure. I had to choose between being good and being whole, and for the first time, I chose myself. Now, when I see eyes that always look tired, voices that never lift, stories that never evolve, I pause. I ask myself, do they want to grow, or do they want to keep bleeding? Are they asking for help or for a witness? Because there's a difference. Pain is not the enemy, but unprocessed pain, repeated, recycled, worshipped, becomes a prison. And prisons spread. They don't stay inside one person. They reach for others. They take company. The complainer doesn't build anything. She lives in ruins and invites you to sit beside her. I once believed that love meant staying. Now I know. Sometimes love means walking away. Not in anger, but in clarity. Not to punish them, but to protect yourself. She taught me that sadness can seduce, that helplessness can control, that not all softness is safe. She was my fourth, and she reminded me that healing is a choice, and not everyone wants to choose it. The fifth didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't charm. He avoided, always. He was polite, pleasant, even funny at times, but he lived at a distance, not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. When things were light, he was present. When things were deep, he disappeared. You could talk about anything as long as it wasn't real, as long as it didn't require him to hold weight, to be responsible, to show up in the fire instead of just the sunlight. The escaper isn't loud. He's subtle, but the emptiness he leaves behind is louder than any scream. At first, I thought he was just calm, thought maybe he needed time, space, freedom, and I gave it. I let him come and go, hoping he would eventually land, that he'd stop drifting and decide to stand. But the escaper never lands. He floats. He moves from place to place, from person to person, from idea to idea, always searching, always avoiding. And when life asks him to choose, to commit, to risk, he smiles, nods, and slides away. He had this way of promising without words, of creating a rhythm that felt safe, consistent, like something you could rely on, until you tried to lean in, until you needed him. Then came the silence, the delay, the excuses wrapped in charm. I've just been busy. I've had a lot on my mind. You know I'm not great with this kind of stuff. And suddenly, the one you thought you could trust becomes a ghost. Not gone, just unreachable. And somehow, you're the one left feeling guilty. Because the escaper is an artist of inversion, he makes you feel like the one who asked for too much, even when you only asked for the bare minimum. He makes responsibility look like pressure, care feel like demand, connection seem like a trap. And the more you try to bring things into clarity, the more he blurs them. He talks in circles, he offers half-truths, he avoids confrontation like it's poison, and in doing so, he poisons everything around him. I remember one day when things were falling apart, not for him, for me. I needed someone, not to fix things, just to be there. I reached out, I asked directly, simply, clearly, and he vanished. Not forever, just long enough for the moment to pass, long enough for me to handle it alone. And when he returned, he acted like nothing had happened. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a grin and a shift of subject. And I laughed with him, because it was easier than asking again. That's what the escaper teaches you, to stop asking, to shrink your needs, to carry your pain in silence, because it's clear he won't carry any of it with you. Not because he's cruel, but because he can't, or won't, or refuses to try. Responsibility terrifies him, not because he doesn't understand it, but because it asks him to be seen, to be consistent, to be real. And realness, to him, feels like a cage. He fears becoming like the people he resents, rigid, predictable, trapped. So he swings the other way, free but detached, present but ungrounded, around but never truly with you. And over time you begin to feel like a placeholder, a pause in his journey, a moment he'll forget once the wind changes. But he taught me something important, that freedom without responsibility is emptiness, that avoiding weight means avoiding meaning, that escape is not the same as peace, and detachment is not the same as strength. Now when I feel someone pulling away at the first sign of depth, when I hear the words, "I'm just not ready," one too many times, when I see someone flinch at the thought of staying still, I remember him, and I take a step back. Because I no longer want to chase ghosts. I no longer want to prove that I'm not too much. I no longer want to carry the whole connection alone. The escaper never truly hurts you in one blow. He erodes you, slowly, silently, until you begin to disappear from yourself. He was my fifth, and the lesson he left was clear. Those who fear responsibility will always make you responsible for everything. There was a moment, after all five had passed through me, when I stood still, not in a dramatic way. No storm, no shouting, no collapse. Just stillness, like the noise had finally emptied, like the echoes had stopped repeating. I looked in the mirror again, not to search, not to fix, but simply to see. And for the first time, I didn't see them. I saw me. Tired, wiser, still healing. But me. Because each of them, the bold, the selfish, the betrayer, the complainer, the escaper, had carried a piece of something I feared, something I hadn't wanted to face in myself. The bold one showed me how often I had swallowed my truth just to keep the peace. How many times I'd let someone speak over me, push past me, and called it patience. But it wasn't patience. It was fear. Fear of conflict. Fear of being called difficult. I had confused endurance with strength. Now I know. Real strength has boundaries. It says no without guilt. The selfish one showed me my own hunger to be seen, how much I gave hoping to be chosen, how often I mistook attention for care. He mirrored the part of me that needed to be needed, and how dangerous that can be. Because when your worth depends on someone else's eyes, you lose sight of yourself. Now I know, being seen by others means nothing if you're invisible to yourself. The betrayer opened a wound I didn't know was still raw. He reminded me of the first time someone made me feel safe, then vanished. The first time I trusted and paid for it. I thought I had moved on, but I hadn't. I just built better walls. He showed me how I protect myself by withholding, by staying close but never too close. And I realized, trust isn't about being naive. It's about choosing to believe in spite of risk, but only with those who earn it. The complainer reflected the part of me that lingered too long in pain, the part that repeated stories of hurt because I didn't know who I was without them. She didn't just drain me, she mirrored how I had drained myself, quietly, over the years, sitting in memories, calling them home. Now I know, healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to live in yesterday when today is still waiting. And the escaper, he was the one I feared becoming most, always drifting, always moving, always avoiding the weight of real presence. He was the ghost of the version of me that ran when things got too heavy, that chose silence over honesty, distraction over depth. But he also showed me how I've changed, that I now stay, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Each of them was dangerous. Yes, but only because I allowed them in without question. I gave without asking. I stayed without boundaries. I trusted without clarity. And in doing so, I lost parts of myself. But I found something too. I found the line between compassion and self-erasure, the space where care ends and sacrifice begins, the quiet knowing that not everyone deserves your story, your softness, your time. I found the truth that love without respect is just longing, that presence without honesty is just noise, that pain, unprocessed, becomes pattern. And more than anything, I found this. Every dangerous person we meet leaves behind a choice, to repeat the cycle or to rewrite it. I won't pretend I'm healed. I won't say I've mastered it all, but I now walk with my eyes open, with my heart guarded, but not closed, with my voice steady, and with a mirror that no longer lies. Because the most dangerous people are not always out there. Sometimes, they are the echoes of who we used to be, and once you see them, really see them, you don't fear them anymore. You simply choose to become something else. There's something that happens when all the noise fades, when the people who once filled your hours, your thoughts, your chest, are no longer there. Not because they vanished in one night, but because you stopped inviting them back. There's a strange quiet that follows. It's not peace, not yet. It's more like a ringing in the ears after the music ends, a reminder that something loud once lived here. But with time, the ringing softens, the silence becomes space. And in that space, something new begins to grow. At first, I didn't know what to do with that space. I filled it with habits, distractions, routines, but nothing rooted, nothing stayed. Until one morning, without trying, I sat still, just sat. Not to meditate, not to heal, just to breathe. And something small shifted. I realized that for the first time in a long while, no one else was in the room. Not physically, not emotionally, not in memory, just me. And that didn't feel lonely. It felt like permission. We're taught to fill our lives with people, with movement, with validation. But sometimes, the most sacred thing you can do is clear the room, to sweep out the voices that never heard you, to silence the echoes that only repeated your fears, to stand in the center of your own life and say, "This is mine now." Each of the 5 had taken something: time, trust, energy, light. But in letting them go, I took something back. I took back the right to choose, to pause, to protect my peace, to stop justifying what I feel, to stop making excuses for others at my own expense. I stopped calling pain loyalty. I stopped mistaking patterns for destiny. Somewhere along the way, we learned to tolerate too much. We call it strength. We wear it like armor. But it's not strength to carry what was never yours. It's not growth to stay where love is conditional. It's not wisdom to explain yourself over and over to someone who only hears what suits them. Letting go is hard, not because of what you lose, but because of what you hoped it would become. You mourn the version that never was, the version where they changed, where you were finally understood, where all your giving paid off. But that version only existed in your mind. The real one was standing right in front of you the whole time, asking you to wake up. And waking up hurts. It burns. It unravels you. But it also frees you. Now I walk slower. I speak softer. Not to be polite, but because I no longer rush to prove myself. I sit with silence, not as an enemy, but as a friend. I no longer chase people who hesitate. I no longer explain myself to those who don't ask. I no longer romanticize potential. I watch now. I observe. Not out of fear, but from a place of quiet knowing. Energy doesn't lie. Patterns don't lie. How someone makes you feel doesn't lie. What's left after the 5 are gone is not emptiness. It's clarity. It's the raw, quiet truth that you don't need to be everything for everyone, that you don't need to shrink to be accepted, that your peace is not selfish, it's sacred. So this is what I know now. The real danger was never just them. The danger was how I forgot myself while trying to hold on to them. And the power, the quiet, pulsing, unshakable power, is what I found when I finally let go. There's a reason these 5 people feel familiar. It's because we've all met them. Some wore friendly faces, some offered love, some even stayed for years. But underneath the surface, they all shared one trait. They took more than they gave. Not just time or energy, but direction. They blurred your sense of self, your inner voice, your clarity. And if you keep them close long enough, you begin to lose track of what life even felt like before them. You must walk away, not because you're better than them, but because you're becoming someone who finally chooses better. When you stay near the bold who disrespect, the selfish who drain, the betrayer who fractures, the complainer who sinks, and the escaper who abandons, you start adjusting to dysfunction. You learn to lower your standards, to justify pain, to live in survival mode, and survival becomes your baseline. But life isn't meant to be endured. It's meant to be lived. Each of these people operates like gravity. They pull you downward, not all at once, slowly, subtly. One compromise here, one silence there, one moment of doubt that becomes a pattern. And over time, you stop recognizing your reflection. You become tired in places you didn't even know could feel heavy. You start calling numbness maturity. You stop dreaming. You stop expecting more. But the truth is, your life bends to the people you let shape it. Your mind adjusts to the voices you hear most. And if those voices constantly limit you, blame you, guilt you, or make you question your worth, it's not love, it's erosion. When you remove these 5, you make room, not just for others, but for yourself, for your full self, for the version of you that is calm without collapse, kind without being used, strong without being cold, present without being drained. That version can't grow in polluted soil. It needs space, honesty, boundaries. It needs people who add, not just take, who listen, not just speak, who show up, not just pass through. Leaving is not cruelty, it's wisdom. You don't need a villain to walk away. You don't need permission. You don't need to explain your peace to those who never protected it. You just need to know this. The longer you stay near what breaks you, the harder it becomes to remember what wholeness felt like. You were not made to constantly fix, carry, prove, or endure. You were made to breathe deeply, to laugh without defense, to rest without guilt. And you can't do that if you're always managing someone else's chaos. So let this be clear. Walk away, not just to escape them, but to return to you. The real you. The grounded, steady, enough as you are version that doesn't need to beg for basic respect. These 5 are not just dangerous because of who they are, but because of what they cost you. Time, energy, identity, joy. And you only get one life. Spend it with people who remind you of your strength, not your scars. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.